One of the things I stated in my last video, titled How to Survive Narcissism, I just wanted to make an addendum to, because of course if anyone has any viable method of getting out of there, do that. It is not going to get any better. You cannot manifest in a toxic environment. You certainly cannot heal in the place that you got sick. It takes some pretty next level stuff to be able to figure out and extreme situations to kind of have to figure out how to do any kind of healing work out of sight and out of mind of the narcissist if you are ensnared within the narcissist's domain, playing king of the hill in hell, as I like to call it. Because, of course, anything that the narcissist sees in you that it doesn't like, which is any sign of you recovering, it can't abide by this. And, of course, it's never outward, it's never direct. It'll all revert back to the ambient abuse, so-called. Because on the surface level, the narcissist will say the right things. They might even appear to do the right things, at least sometimes, and when it suits them, of course. This is one of the many things that causes the cognitive dissonance within victims and the narcissist's enablers. More often than not, any enabler of the narcissist simply doesn't know better, but then again, they also, if they can't bring themselves to accept what's actually happening, because it's just too dark and awful to consider, then in effect they become the narcissist's official enablers. And as it's said by experts and the literature out there, enablers of abuse are equally culpable. But there's a number, if you're I'm talking about, the more extreme situations. And trying to state that even in those, there is some kind of beacon of hope, and it's not pretty. Not at all. It's been like a plant growing through concrete with some lunatic gardener hovering around the surface of the concrete. And every time the plant starts to sprout, the lunatic gardener starts stomping it out, whilst also chastising the plant for not growing. This is one of the narcissist's many crazy-making behaviors. And of course, the narcissist will also report to its friends and family about, your many issues and how you just can't seem to get it together, or whatever the case may be. It's absolutely perverse. It's disgusting and appalling. If you attempt to get anything going, to develop resources, so that's another thing that has to be done out of sight and out of mind of the narcissist. If you're lucky enough that you can get some kind of small job or something that doesn't make the narcissist feel threatened in any way, of course, it would typically have to be something that the narcissist would perceive as beneath the narcissist, or at the very least, almost at the same level of the narcissist, but not quite. You can't be, or else, it's another way you're going to be in for it, in a roundabout way. And there are a myriad of tips and tricks for dealing with and deflecting the narcissist. And I would recommend the work of Scott Bassett in that. I've referred to him in an earlier video as the narcissist whisperer.
An aspect of a narcissist's denial and sort of their analytical apparatus, their mode of operating and thinking, and how it affects their perception of the world, and how that perception sort of gets to you and confuses you and muddles your vision and fogs your sight and all that, to how they're able to get these ideas in your mind, these often very perverse ideas in a subtle way that you don't realize are perverse at the time. How you subtly accept them, believe that they're your own, believe that they're reasonable, and how it really tilts your entire view of the world and puts you in a position to be more vulnerable to them, drawn to them, dependent on them. That introduction is not particularly new at all, but I hope that this video will shed some light on what goes on in their mind.
I don't know how he maintained his calm to kind of study them and come up with these kind of comprehensive methods and understandings, but he did. I get it. It's like he used his time as like a monastic stay, and he studied them. I say alien because it's so unthinkable what they do. It's so anathema to humanity, and their behaviors and machinations operate so insidiously and perniciously on the periphery of awareness and with the veneers of plausible deniability. It makes it unthinkable anybody could be capable of doing something like this, because it sounds so innately conspiratorial. And it is. That's the thing. It is. It really is. And it's the problem is it's innate for them to behave this way. There's often been something that's been called the genius attribute of narcissism. I heard this discussed not too long ago in a presentation, and the presentation was about how it's not really the narcissists themselves that's particularly genius necessarily. But what it is their unconscious mind, which in effect is a quantum supercomputer that we all have. But in this case, it's a quantum supercomputer in the hands of a malignant child who perceives interpersonal racketeering as some kind of game. The narcissist is a constant, invisible adversary. The narcissist needs adversaries as well for their despotic and dystopian worldviews, deep down, which they seldom tend to share with anybody else. You see, they would see this as giving someone power over them. If somebody knew what the narcissist actually thought or felt about any particular thing. There's a look that people have often noted as the duper's delight on the narcissist's face. It's usually something you might catch out of the corner of your eye, a narcissist just giving this bizarre smirk at a particular time. You're not quite sure why. Well, this is typically attributed to the duper's delight, and the narcissist is thinking something to the effect of, I can't believe these fools think that I'm some kind of human being. And as I've said before, why wouldn't they? You're doing the unthinkable. It's literally unthinkable. This is often why they get away with it. And quite frankly, if so much information hadn't gotten out into the public lexicon on this topic, I don't think I would have ever started speaking about it more openly either. Because of the way it sounds. But thank God it's finally gotten to this point. Some experts have noted that narcissism is endemic, and it's been on the rise. It's a developmental disorder. It's pernicious and infectious. As far as I'm aware, it is not possible for a person to develop narcissism after they've, already developed as a person. This is something that can only happen as strange bypassing mutation sort of development, and skipping all of the necessary developmental stages. From going from a child to adulthood. And the narcissist can be stuck developmentally anywhere between the age of 2 and 12, I believe, is what I've heard. That's what I've heard stated the most times, repeatedly. And the narcissist has made a game of playing pretend and blending in. And their big game is their ensnarements. For the longest time, I was doing a kind of like a narc roast thing here on my channel. In part as a coping mechanism, but also because I thought it could be useful to insert some satire. Satire can be therapeutic in even some of the darkest of situations. But also as a way of utilizing the channel to help finish self-actualizing some more as a person, which I was never permitted to do. Again, through ambient abuse and a number of other things. And as outlandish as that might sound to some, that's part and parcel. If you're brought up in a narcissistic dynamic, narcissistic parents, one of the many things they cannot abide by is their offspring self-actualizing. And it's just innate. It is innate. It is a byproduct of their arrested development, in a sense, and strange coping mechanisms. And you will encounter this throughout life until doing the family of origin work, because it's unconscious. But unconscious can be very much like a force of nature. And rejecting it wholesale does not work. Doesn't work. Thankfully, if you do the work. Yeah. And using this channel is part of that. Yeah, it's been very helpful for that. It's the only kind of safe place that I could do so. And there's a lot of confusion out there about this whole safety thing. And in my case, what I'm referring to as safety is some place that is not innately sociopathic and hell-bent on being some kind of lunatic gardener, stomping out your growth and development. More often than not, just for the hell of it. And a couple of videos ago, I discussed how the narcissist likes to zombify its targets. And, in effect, this just doesn't work. It's not a long-term thing that can be done. And yet, the narcissist does it over and over again. The narcissist doesn't understand why their targets can't simply be zombified and do as they say, regardless of the ever-shifting goalposts. It's just not about any of that. It's a narcissist and or highly narcissistic person is not driven by things that would make sense to an average person. Fuel being one of them, narcissistic supply. That's a topic in and of itself. And one thing narcissists are completely averse to, or narcissistic people, is doing any kind of inner healing work or any kind of therapeutic modalities. They are, I'd go as far as to say, pathologically adverse to doing so. That's one of the many fortifications that the narcissism is in place to prevent. It's like an engine that won't turn over. It's just constantly stalling. And they keep doing the same things over, and they just, they come up with a myriad of counterfeit justifications. And they believe their own bullshit. This is one of many things that is most concerning, and it's why they are typically such believable liars. And the way that they lie is so very convincing, because they've spent a lifetime learning how to do so without having any scruples about doing so. And half the time they've convinced themselves that they're telling the truth. This is another function of the narcissism. This is why some have referred to them as, and I quote, high-functioning lunatics. There's a reason their game against targets is referred to as ensnarement, because, well, what do you know? Over and over and over again, all over the known world, it seems to be the same modus operandi. The glitz and glamour to lure one in, usually at a vulnerable time. Narcissists tend to be somewhat of opportunistic predators in this regard. And then slowly over time, and sometimes maybe a bit quicker and more reckless cases, but in the more sophisticated ones, I suppose you could say, slowly over time you will find yourself depleted from damn well near everything. Struggling to survive and in a bewildering state of confusion, because most people can't make heads or tails of what's going on. And even if they could, who can they tell? Typically, any friends and family that might be able to render aid have been co-opted by the narcissist. On the other side of the equation, there's the guilt and shame of potentially spoiling the relationship someone has with the narcissist, if, of course, they even consider what you have to say. That's a very relatable sentiment and feeling. It's just a horrible position to be in, all around. All around. Even if one could attempt to bring themselves to attempt to do so, you think, well, how would they even possibly believe it, considering how things look, and as a side effect of the narcissist or narcissistic person's endless, subtle little propaganda campaigns. Triangulation is another major component in the narcissist's interpersonal racketeering operation, which is comprehensive. Just like anything else with the full gambit of narcissistic abuse, it is comprehensive. And this is due in part to how it's been described as the narcissism acting like a desperate animal, terrified of being exposed at any time, and desperate to believe in the fiction, and fear of the fiction collapsing. Consequently, this is the only chance they have at something I've playfully referred to as resurrection on this channel. Ideally, it's something that is accomplished somewhat experimentally in cold therapy, as I understand it. I'm certainly no expert on the topic, but I understand it enough. The idea is to break down the narcissist's false construct in a therapeutic setting, in a clinical setting, so the narcissist can get in touch with the fragmented and wounded inner child trapped in there somewhere, and begin rebuilding from a place of authenticity instead of a house of cards, in a sense. A very insidious and pernicious house of cards, a very formidable house of cards, but a house of cards nonetheless. In the house of cards, the narcissist will fight to the bitter end, defending, to continue to perpetuate the unthinkable. Thanks for tuning in.